It all began one day when Ricardo, just 12 years old, was spending time with his older cousin Mike. Mike called him over and said, "Let me tell you about my time in the war." What followed was a chilling series of stories, tales of violence and unspeakable acts Mike claimed to have committed during the Vietnam War. As if to prove his words, Mike showed Ricardo Polaroid photos of the gruesome things he had done. Surprisingly, young Ricardo wasn't horrified. Instead, he was fascinated. A year later, the cousins met again, and things took a darker turn. One night, Ricardo was at Mike's place when a heated argument erupted between Mike and his wife. In a fit of rage, Mike pulled out a boomstick and ended her life, right in front of 13-year-old Ricardo. But rather than being traumatized, Ricardo seemed drawn in by the violence. From that point on, Ricardo's life began to spiral. He got into drugs, particularly hallucinations, and started committing petty crimes. His behavior grew more erratic, and his religious obsession took hold. By the time he was 17, Ricardo dropped out of high school, abandoning any sense of normalcy. Around that time, he got a job at a Holiday Inn, but his actions only worsened. He started sneaking into guests' rooms, stealing valuables while they slept. Eventually, he began doing awful things to some of the guests. When he was caught, he was fired on the spot, but it did nothing to change his downward trajectory. At 22, Ricardo moved to San Francisco, hoping for a fresh start, but instead of building a new life, he fell deeper into drug addiction, living off junk food and neglecting his hygiene. His teeth rotted, and he became a shell of his former self. But it wasn't just his appearance that was decaying, his mind was unraveling too. Then one day, he made a chilling decision. He would start ending lives. It began with a little girl. She was just 9 years old, searching for a lost dollar bill when Ricardo approached her. "I know where it is," he said with a smile. The girl followed him into the basement of the hotel where he was staying, unaware of the horror awaiting her. Ricardo did awful things to her and ended her life, marking the beginning of a deadly spree. If you're captivated by this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. We have more intriguing tales coming your way. 3 months later, Ricardo moved to Los Angeles and settled in Skid Row. His addiction worsened, and so did his violence. His next victim was a 79-year-old woman. He stalked her, broke into her home, did awful things to her, and ended her life with a knife. After robbing her of money and jewelry, he vanished into the night. Over the next several months, Ricardo continued his deadly spree, targeting unsuspecting victims and leaving a trail of bloodshed across the city. The police began connecting the dots. They suspected a person responsible for ending lives was on the loose, but had little to go on. They had vague descriptions, a few fingerprints, and one unique clue, a shoe print that appeared at several crime scenes. That shoe print belonged to a rare brand of sneakers, sold only once in Ricardo's size. The media dubbed him the Night Stalker. Ricardo, now a notorious figure, started feeling the pressure. Fearing capture, he fled back to San Francisco. But even there, his dangerous tendencies continued. He broke into a couple's home, ended their lives, and left religious symbols scrawled on the walls. The mayor of San Francisco held a press conference, revealing new details about the killer, including the unique shoe print. Ricardo, realizing the police were closing in, panicked. He threw his shoes off the Golden Gate Bridge, hoping to destroy the evidence. But it wasn't enough to stop the inevitable. Days later, Ricardo returned to Los Angeles, where he tried and failed to break into another home. His arrogance grew, and during one attack, he identified himself to a victim. "Tell them the Night Stalker was here." It was a fatal mistake. The police soon linked a stolen car to Ricardo through a single fingerprint, finally identifying him as the Night Stalker. 2 days later, Ricardo's face was all over the news. His mugshot was broadcast across the city, and people were on high alert. It didn't take long before someone spotted him at a convenience store. Panicked, Ricardo fled, attempting to steal multiple cars. But as more people recognized him, a group of bystanders chased him down, beating him until the police arrived. Ricardo's reign of terror had come to an end. In court, Ricardo was charged with 13 instances of ending lives, 5 attempted instances of doing awful things, and several assaults and burglaries. He was sentenced to death. But even on death row, his story took a bizarre turn. Ricardo attracted fans, people who wrote to him, visited him, and one fan even married him. The Night Stalker had found love behind bars. Isn't it crazy? His story finally ended when he died of cancer, leaving behind a legacy of terror and bloodshed. Thanks for watching. If you like this story, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more shocking cases.